you been briefed on what Israel Katz has said in the last 24 hours? His latest is that he's reportedly ordered Israel's military to prepare for establishing a camp, which he's called a humanitarian city, on the ruins of Rafah. In briefing to Israeli journalists, he said that Palestinians would have to go through security screening before entering, and once inside they wouldn't be allowed to leave. Israel forces would control the perimeter and move 600,000 Palestinians into the camp.
Well, what we're seized on at the moment is getting a ceasefire.
Yes.
I'd like to sort of brief the committee on the sticking points within getting that ceasefire. I think the committee...
We'd be very interested to hear that, thank you.
The committee will recognise that we are closer than we've been at some time for a ceasefire, but we're clearly not yet there. First is, I want the ceasefire to be permanent. I do not want a pause of 60 days. I want it to be permanent. I know between our Qatari and American counterparts in discussion with Israel and obviously Hamas, there is still a discussion about how permanent that ceasefire will be. That's the first thing.
May I just interject? I mean, the last time we saw you, we seem to have been in exactly the same position then, if you remember. I think we were still in a war at that point, hoping there was going to be a ceasefire. There was one for a time, and now we're back again.
Hence, I'd like it to be a permanent
exactly.
ceasefire.
No, I understand. Yeah.
The second point you make is about the IDF and their location out width of Gaza or in a buffer zone. And I suspect the statement from Defence Minister Katz is in relation to that. And I suspect if indeed he is insistent of that position, then it will be very hard to see how we get that ceasefire, because there is an acute discussion about the degree to which the IDF withdraws from Gaza. The third, of course, is aid, and I imagine that the committee are as concerned as I am for months at the new aid architecture that has been set up, that is entirely unacceptable, that is not delivering to people. People are dying, in fact, waiting for the aid. I think I described it as an abomination. You saw the United Kingdom coordinate with 26 other countries our horrors at the current aid programme. I spoke to Tom Fletcher earlier on this week. Clearly there's got to be a role for the UN and UN agencies if we are to get the aid issues sorted out. So that is the other issue that is before us. And then the fourth issue, of course, relates to hostages. I think there's 56 hostages still there. Sadly, many of them are no longer with us. About 20 are likely to be alive, and there's some discussion about how you coordinate that. Do you get 10 exit on the first phase? I hope the hostage situation can be achieved and dealt with Hamas. But I think that the statements that you've just described from Defence Minister Scott relate very much to where the IDF are located, and you'll understand that if what you describe is true, then I think that would be a big sticking point for getting that ceasefire.
So in the last 24 hours, we've heard reports that the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, where at least 700 Palestinians have been shot whilst waiting for food. There are further plans to expand on that, where the Israeli Defence Minister now plans to move 600,000 Palestinians to a camp in the ruins of the city of Rafah. That's just the first phase. Eventually wants to move the whole of the population of Gaza there. They're calling it a so-called humanitarian transit area, but there's no schools there, there's no medical provisions there, there are no any other facilities, and there are plans for forced screening. Now, Katz wants international partners to be involved in that. Will Britain oppose this, and can you guarantee us in this committee that no British companies or NGOs will be involved in those plans?
Well, we've been very clear that we don't support the aid foundation that has been set up. It's not doing a good job. Too many people are close to starvation. Too many people have lost their lives. we have led globally on our condemnation of the system that has been set up. What we do support are the work of organisations like the World Food Programme, who can play an important role. My understanding is actually over the last few days and weeks there have been better conversations between the UN agency system and Israel. So I'm surprised at the statements that I've seen from Mr. Katz over the last 24 hours, and as I've indicated, they run contra to the proximity to a ceasefire that I thought we were heading towards. So I wonder if there's some politicking going on for those within the government that for some reason standing opposed to this. But what you've described, I don't recognise as a serious context in which the people of Gaza can get the aid and support that they need at this time.
Britain will be opposing any such.
Yes.
Thank you.
I take your point about law, but many of our constituents suspect that the British government is not doing all that it can to influence the Israeli government in relation to the war in Gaza. And specifically on the subject of the sale of F-35 parts into the global spares pool. There's no tracking of these parts. So what do you make of the charge that this is a deliberate decision to look the other way in relation to F-35 spare parts?
I don't accept that. I don't accept that. One, because we are not selling arms sales to Israel. We were only 1% of global arms sales to Israel. It's important to remember. So we are having a conversation about 1% of the global arms sales to Israel. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we have suspended arms sales to Israel. We have suspended direct arms sales that could be used, by the way, in the F-35. But what we have said, which has just been upheld by UK courts, is that we are not able, in terms of that supply chain, of which we play a role, but that's a global supply chain, we are not going to bring down F-35s in other theatres of conflict. And members of this committee, with respect, might also press me on our obligations to Ukraine. They might also, and other conflicts around the world. That is why I made that decision, and that has been upheld by the courts.
F-35 isn't being used in Ukraine. The F-22 is being used in Ukraine.
But you'll understand that there are partners across our allies in NATO who also are in a defensive posture in relation to Russia. So you may not like the decision, but I stand by the decision, which has just been upheld by the courts.
In a 2016 paper published by RAND, it was suggested that the legal agreement that set up the global spares pool allows participant nations to opt out and establish separate stocks of assets not subject to shared management. Is this something that the British government has explored with allies?
No.
Are you at all concerned that what we have here is the defence procurement tail wagging the foreign policy dog?
That sounds like a soundbite that's just not serious about our national defences. It's my obligation to be serious about our national defences. I am not going to do anything that puts our armed soldiers at risk, but I also meet my obligations under international humanitarian law. There's been a lot of coverage of this. There was a court case. The government won the court case.